by the way, when you mentioned the comment about having a seat at the table and being able to influence decisions and policy and resources, there's never been a greater time for employee communications to do that than now. The employee communicator who has a focus on outcomes, as you said, not outputs, not the number of things
Mm-hmm.
that we're doing and the number of channels and the number of articles, but what behavior change. And I think importantly, we have to understand that it's not a straight line, and it's not something that every communication forum can deliver on. So, for example, if you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, "Hey, I want every employee to adopt this new behavior," and you're going to do it through an email, it's like that's not going to work. You're going to have multiple channels about that focus not only on what it is we want them to do. It's you got to deliver the why, right? And maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to come across in an email. Maybe that won't come across in a video. It's going to come across from somebody that you believe and trust, your manager, right? Where we're really falling behind already versus other functions as communicators is the strategic application of AI to do predictive analytics to help us make decisions about where and
Mm-hmm.
how to use the data that we have to make better, more informed decisions. I think the thing that AI has a long way to go on is putting the human touch, right? That heart, that winning their hearts and engaging their hearts. It's just not there yet. It can't. It can take content that you've developed and polish it. I think make it a little more softer. Maybe that's the right word,
Mm-hmm.
or make it more user friendly. But it's not going to be the one that just says, "Here's the way that we need to tell this story." Use the power of human imagination and human connection um, to your benefit. Don't underestimate the power of another human heart. That's part of the story. It's not just that, oh, it's nice to have it. Like the expectation is you're going to do something with employee communications that helps drive performance in this business. And I know because I'm an executive how important it is to engage the internal stakeholder
Mm-hmm.
before we engage anybody else. Because to your earlier point, Brendan, if it's not the real stuff on the inside, it's never going to pass on the outside.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, should we get into talking about internal comms?
Sure, let's talk about internal
Because yeah,
comms. My
because
favorite
we could
topic.
do your favorite topic outside of wrestling and
As that, that's pretty much
mine
it.
outside of running in the bush.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mm. Yeah. I guess to frame up today's podcast, we're talking about strategic workplace internal comms. And, I find it a fascinating topic. I'm not an expert on the topic, and I'm really excited to ask some questions of you, Mark, today. And my fascination comes from, the science of business. I love business. I love to see how business works. And I love to see when brands flow together, well, flow in themselves. And when
Mhm.
brands flow, you've got brand promise on one side and brand delivery on the other. And
Mhm.
getting brand promise to meet brand delivery is an art. And often we don't experience it. But when we do experience it, it's a beautiful thing. And, to get that to work, we have to deliver. I believe the first thing that comes is brand delivery, where we've got our workforce aligned to our purpose, our vision, our mission, our values.
Mhm.
And then when all that comes together, we create the magic. And the larger the organization, the more complex that is. It's a bigger science to make all that happen. And that's where I think your internal communications, which is often not seen behind the scenes, is a science in itself, and it's nearly a psychology. The more I'm thinking about it from, the review I've done of your publication and the report that we recently released, the more I'm thinking there's so much psychology in the
Mhm.
process, and it's a really
Yeah.
interesting place. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you today and just sort of getting into your mind a little bit on the space of internal comps. Before I do, I just want to share with you, we recently released a report. It was produced by Kerry Eng, which was a intern at Action HQ, and she interviewed 26 internal communications professionals and consultants, and thank you for your contribution to the report as well. And there are a few things that came out of it and we'll sort of talk through it and some of my questions to you today. And these are sort of some of the key topics that I sort of found came to the top of the report. That internal comms teams are often not represented at the executive table, and I'm going to be curious to see how you think that's been trending. The role is becoming more complex. There's less resources and there's more noise to communicate through. Challenges across reach and locations, multiple locations, and getting the same message or the relevant messages across locations. Dispersed workforces, working with hard to reach workforces who are not engaged. I think we had one of the respondents was had about 16,000 employees, and 13,000 of those employees were not even connected
Wow.
to online. So there's some huge challenges in that. The repetition of messaging and how to make sure that it doesn't become noise in itself, the art of repetition, and the measure of behavioral change versus so sort of outcomes versus inputs, I thought was a really interesting finding as well. And the maturity of that within the industry, I thought is really interesting. And challenges around lack of KPIs and the opportunities around AI and the challenges around AI as well. So there are a couple of things that sort of raised to the surface in one report with 26 professionals representing about 280,000 workforce. So we'll talk a bit to that today, Mark. I think it's going to be interesting. I'd like to introduce you though before we move into a few questions, because I think you've got a really interesting, colourful profile outside of jiu-jitsu and beach wrestling. And I haven't got through the whole profile, but a few things that stood out is you worked at the ABC News in your very early days. I thought that was quite an
Good.
interesting spot.
Uh-huh.
Do you still remember that?
I do. I mean, I was very low on the totem pole, but I was working as a production assistant on, if you've ever seen any of the national broadcasts, World News Tonight, Good Morning America out of ABC, and also the direction and information radio networks. That's actually where I started before I moved into the television side. So a lot of production work, a lot of learning, and a lot of immense and intense deadline work at ABC. But taught me a great deal about what news really is and what it takes to put a program like that on the air.
Mm.
Uh, um, yeah,
Yeah, I reckon some really interesting grounding in early technology communications and really hands-on experience of that kind of line of work as well. Then you moved into American Electric Power, and you're award-winning publisher of the Employee magazine, editor and publisher. And I looked it up yesterday. Is about 17,000 employees. So it's interesting, actually being in the space of publishing physical publications.
mhm.
And for me, it takes me back to when I started in my line of business. I was working with floppy disks and, communications before the internet. And
I had a
we
typewriter, so
produce,
yeah, I'm with you.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. And we produce a lot of physical materials, direct mail and communications. And, they have interesting cut through. So I'm interested in your thoughts about, that coming back
It
or
is
still
coming
being a
back.
channel. It is.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
and it's coming back not only for employees, but for other stakeholders that are connected to employees. So there are many organizations that see a publication, a magazine, a newsletter that goes to the home that influences and connects with spouses and children and other people in the home as a way of also influencing and extending reach of the messaging that the organization wants to connect to its workforce. So there's a lot going on there. Retirees, another
Okay.
big stakeholder group growing. Mhm.
When you say retirees, what do you mean by retirees?
Well, retirees can play a very big role in organizational health and development. And I'll give you a quick example. Later in my career, I ran executive and global employee communications for the DuPont company, about
Mm,
30,000 employees in countries all over the world. There was a proxy battle going on, and it turned out that the key to winning the proxy, fight, if you will, from the company side was to engage retirees who kept their shares of the company stock. So when it
Mm,
really came down to like which shares were going to vote in favor or against the activist proposal, it was the retirees who made the difference. So people who are not thinking about retirees as an extended internal communication set of stakeholders often can be missing the boat.
mm. I would have never have thought of that. It's
Yep.
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Sometimes you
that's
just have to live these experiences to know, well, I don't think I ever would have thought that too. But yeah, it's a real thing. It's a real set of stakeholders that would serve you well, not to overlook.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that's what I'm liking about your career. You've been right on the front line of internal comms, and you've
Yeah.
seen so many things from the print publications. And you worked at PepsiCo, looking in there about 300,000.
Yeah.
I think it's workforce across 200
Yeah. Yes.
countries, and
Yes.
you were executive of employee comms in that space too.
I was, yes. Very interesting as you then begin to think about the influence, not just of the company as a single enterprise, but what are the priorities of regions of the world, and what are the language requirements, and what is it that management needs in addition to just reaching to employees. So you really start to think about segmentation of internal audience as much as you would in marketing. Like marketing requires segmentation, so you know who you're going
Mm,
after. And the very same is true. One size doesn't necessarily fit all in the world of employee communications. You want to have a consistent message across the enterprise, that's true. But in terms of how much detail, what that detail is, and what it encompasses, can be very different from a senior level executive to a frontline employee versus middle management. And so that's where we really
mm,
get into when you talk about it's becoming more complex and more challenging and far more strategic. And you're absolutely right. It is, and for all the right
mm,
reasons. And by the way, when you mentioned the comment about having a seat at the table and being able to influence decisions and policy and resources, there's never been a greater time for employee communications to do that than now. And the catalyst for that was COVID. I know literally
hmm
overnight, as organizations across the planet were shutting doors and sending people out, all of a sudden they realized, oh my gosh, do we have a way of reaching these people in a way that's meaningful, and meets them where they are? Meaning, is it the right channel? Is this the right content for that channel? Is it the right frequency? All these elements that go into
mm,
reaching internal stakeholders who deliver. Ideally, and as you said, Brenda, the brand promise, right? Is it just
yes.
smoke and mirrors? Is it just words on a page? Or if we go to Glassdoor, are we going to see reviews from employees that basically say one of two things? Yeah, what we are, what we say we are, or we are not what the words on the paper
Mm.
say. And that's a big issue for employment, for recruiting, as well as for engaging employees and keeping the morale, to make sure that they feel good and they're connected to that promise of whatever that brand is designed to be.
Yeah, because I can imagine if you're in the workforce, you see this outbound messaging going out to consumers or business to business, and then you're going, "That's not us on the inside." That's got to be a morale killer on the inside of
Absolutely.
the organization. Yeah.
And that's what people are passive about it. Increasingly, we see employees as activists who are not afraid to
Mm,
speak up and say, "That's not true. That's not true."
yeah.
And so it's not just a question of like, are we, getting a message out there? It's like, are we delivering on this? And are we prepared to listen to employees who are calling us for what we are, meaning we're not delivering on that? That can be a very tough conversation to have. But when you have data to back it up, people start to listen to you. So that's a big thing when we talk
Mm,
about measurement and how important that is to employee communications. The employee communicator who has a focus on outcomes, as you said, not outputs, not the number of things
mhm.
that we're doing and the number of channels and the number of articles, but what behavior change or what beliefs. I'm a big believer in the awareness, understanding, belief, which is sort of that combination. When you understand something, okay, and not only do I understand it, but I actually believe that's true. And then the ultimate nirvana is I'm going to act on that. I'm going to change some behavior to deliver on whatever that thing is that you're communicating about. I'm a big
Mm,
believer that that continuum is the ultimate that every communicator who works with internal stakeholders should be driving toward. And I think importantly, we have to understand that it's not a straight line, and it's not something that every communication forum can deliver on. So, for example, if you're
Mm.
saying, "Hey, I want every employee to adopt this new behavior," and you're going to do it through an email, it's like that's not going to work. You're going to have multiple channels about that focus not only on what it is we want them to do. It's you got to deliver the why, right? And maybe
Mm.
that's not going to come across in an email. Maybe that won't come across in a video. It's gonna come across from somebody that you believe and trust, your manager, right? "Hey, I'm gonna sit down and talk to you
Yes.
about why we're changing the safety procedures, because it's not because it's a fun thing for us to do, it's because we wanna keep you healthy and safe." That's pure, and let me
Mm.
give you an example of what happens when we don't. So, that makes it real for them. They have to have skin in the game, as we like to say. They have to have a reason to believe. They need to see themselves in, the "What's in it for me if I do this thing that you're asking me to do through communication."
Yeah, and I think that was a key interesting finding I found from the report is that line managers, leaders, executives, walking the talk and also reinforcing messaging is critical. And I imagine there's also the challenge that a lot of, say, line managers haven't been trained to be trainers. And the other thing that went through my mind as well is when you've got all these complex channels of communication, how do you then you sort of nearly need another layer on making sure the managers are also receiving, what we
Yeah.
need to know now. I imagine that's business as usual for guys like you, but that's what goes through my mind as
Yeah,
being quite
it's
complex,
spot
quite
on.
scientific.
It's spot on. So I was talking earlier about segmentation, and that's
Mm.
a prime example of where you need to focus. A key audience for you is not the general average employee. It's the line manager. It's the frontline manager, and you have to
Mm.
ask yourself two things. One, do they have the information to communicate? Right, that's important, right? But the second thing that
Yes.
most people overlook is, do they have the skill to deliver it? Therein lies one of the bigger opportunities for employee communications professionals. And it used to be that's all about executive development. That belongs in HR. It's like, well, you know who's going to know more about that than HR usually? It's going to be the communicator. So communicators have a big opportunity when they start focusing on segmentation, really thinking about empowering frontline managers or any kind of leader in the organization with communications. It's not just about the content, right? Here, go
Mm.
share this. It's like, let's talk about how you do this in a way that's relevant to your people. Okay. And so then we get into sort of the whole area of competencies for leadership that are communication driven, right? So,
Yes.
do we understand what is your message? Do we understand? Do you know your audience? Have you thought about the things that they're going to say that'll be like, no, I don't believe that, or that's not right for me. How do you make it relevant for them? Then we get into, for example, discussion about storytelling, the power that exists in storytelling. And I'll
Mm.
be honest with you, most leaders, most people aren't necessarily good storytellers, right? That's some people are naturally born with it, but very, very few. It's that's a skill that people need to learn and they need to cultivate. And who
Mm.
better than a communicator is going to know better how to tell a story? That's what we do from the very beginning of my career as a news person, right? It was all about telling stories. So I always like to say, Brendan, this is about it's about the art and the science of
Mm.
communication, right? The art is at the end of the day, we have to engage not just their heads and their hands. We have to engage their hearts, right?
Yes.
They're people, they're humans. If I
Mm.
start throwing just facts and figures and statistics at them, they're going to glaze over and say, "I could care less." But if I say there's a reason that there's a person in this story, let me just tell you a story about a person, what it means.
Yeah.
Literally, I'm going on a tangent here, but there's a lot of research that shows that when we even say the words, "I want to tell you a story," the limbic system of our brains is activated, right? It gives us the aha. That limbic system makes us go, "Aha, that's what
Mm.
happened," or or he delivers in tears. We're moved by what we're hearing, right? Or we get excited and we want to cheer. That's the power of storytelling, and most people really don't realize that. They just think I'll tell the beginning and the middle and the end. No, no. It really is
Mm.
about engaging people. And when you say the words, I want to tell you a story, something changes it
Yeah.
because all of a sudden our brains are going, oh, you're going to take a bunch of stuff that's floating out there and you're going to put it in order. It's all going to fit. and I
Mm.
want that's what my brain wants. So go ahead
Yes.
and make it work for me as a human being, right? So we say engage your heads, engage your hands, engage your hearts. That's the
Yeah.
beauty when it's done right and it's done well. It's about the art and the science of communication coming together. That's the hard part
Mm.
too, by the way, right? It's like, yeah, I
Oh,
can be a really great
absolutely.
storyteller and I shed a tear or whatever, but it's like, okay, and the point is, why are you telling me this story about my job or about this company? It's like, well, that's our job, is to connect it to something that you care about for this enterprise that we're all working for.
Mm.
And therein lies the ultimate challenge. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, but there's such an immense connection between the art and science of communication and where storytelling and then the sort of concept of segmentation, of strategy, of channel selection,
Mm.
sequencing, all that stuff is part of. I'm pointing in my book here, but that's why it's so important to people who want to do strategic communications and engage internal stakeholders. Have to be thinking more than just, hey, let's just put it out in a memo and see what happens.
Mm, it sort of comes back down to, an organization has its brand story, its brand
Yeah.
positioning,
Yep.
and when you frame up that internal comms is about telling stories, it actually makes it feel quite an enjoyable process.
Yeah.
What is our stories? What are our stories going to be this year, this month? What's our overarching story of the organization? And then how do we deliver that story across various channels to meet all the segments but
Yeah.
maintain that sort of, the integrity of that story the whole way through and
Right.
keep it exciting and
Yeah. So
yeah.
I can give you
Oh,
an
that's
example, I think, of an organization that is really, really good at this. And it happens to be one of my clients. So take it for what it's worth. But Signet
mhm,
Jewelers here in the States is based in Akron, Ohio. Their major brands include Zales, Kay, and Jared, and then some other brands, James Allen in the UK. But one of the things that they've done that's been so beautiful from the inside out is really talk about their purpose as a jewelry company and about celebrating life and love. And it's really to go, oh, well, who's going to talk
mhm.
about love as their purpose? And yet, this is an organization that knows how to do it. They
Nice.
tell stories about their retail operations, store managers, assistant store managers, even during COVID, where brides and grooms were coming in to select wedding rings and wedding bands. And for whatever reasons, for actually obvious reasons, they weren't able to get married because of COVID. You know what they did? These people went out and they bought flowers and they equipped these young people who were getting married with all the things that they needed for an instant wedding in their stores. And it's like
Nice.
that's something that says it's not words on a paper, right? We believe
Mm,
in celebrating life and love, right? And so they
mm.
live their brand purpose every day, and and they do it fluidly and they do it regularly. So I think where some organizations get into trouble is they'll post the words, as a brand, right? As a brand message. And then they get away from it. They're just all about selling, selling, selling. And it's like if you get away from that for too long, your internal stakeholders no longer believe it. They just feel the pressure of having to make sales quotas, right? But when you were able
Mhm,
to bring those stories back to them, because they're not everywhere, they don't get to see all those stories. That's the communicator's job, is to go out and mine for those stories and then to present them, often through senior leaders or whatever channel that they come up with, to say, hey, remember, as hard as this work gets, and it is hard, this is why we do this. And you want to talk about
mm.
touching hearts as well as hands and heads. It's like it works. So I give
Yeah.
big kudos to Signet Jewelers, my colleague and friend Colleen Rooney, who is the chief um, uh, communications and sustainability officer there. She's done an amazing job of integrating brand purpose with internal communications as well as external stakeholder engagement. So
Yeah, that's really
yeah,
interesting. And,
yeah.
imagine like a lot of this, this because of the complexities, the segmentation, the messaging, the reach, the repetition. You need to have a framework to pull this together. And I guess that is the study of internal comms is, you study it, you learn it, you create frameworks. But, the world is moving so fast all the time. And you've just released the second edition of the engaging employees through strategic communications, which I've had the pleasure of reading the measurement section and the AI section.
Oh,
Is
great,
that
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really impressive, and I think you've seen changes happen in a really short period of time, which is why you've updated the publication. What are
Yes.
some of the what are some of those key changes, and when did the first version come out versus this recently published version?
Right. So the first version came out in 2022. So it was after COVID. And in that book, there was a chapter called, Future Influences. And in it, we
Hmm.
had, blockchain references. We talked about this little thing called AI as something that was coming around the corner. And oh my gosh, did it come around the corner? It came so fast and so furiously that now in the second edition, which is coming out on March the 12th, so it's very, very
Hmm.
close to the publishing date, there's a whole chapter on AI. And over the
Yes.
last several years, I'm an adjunct faculty member at the University of Missouri School of Journalism, and my colleague John Semmel and I have been. We got early on this bandwagon because we saw this is not just a thing that marketing is going to use. We saw this is going to be disruptive for every kind of communication and marketing professional, not to mention the rest of the planet, right? No matter what you
Hmm.
do. But
Yeah.
we wanted to specifically focus on the world of communications and understand just how disruptive this thing was going to be. And so we have now 3 years of data. The fourth survey is out now. So we talk to a couple of hundred communicators every year. We ask them about their use of AI for their
Hmm.
work, along with their attitudes toward it, and increasingly, what are you doing in terms of ethical and responsible use of it, all under the kind of the auspices of leadership and governance, right? So it's not, and that's
Yes.
the model that we're using. It's what we're finding is that the first leg of the three stool or the three-legged model is about productivity. And so, not surprisingly, everybody's experimenting with Claude or ChatGPT or whatever learning LM system that you're using,
Hmm.
and that's great because it saves us. We've seen the numbers are showing, you know, uh, phenomenal amounts of time being saved writing and editing, drafting, putting together, earlier preliminary versions of content that we have to create. Where we're really falling behind already versus other functions as communicators is the strategic application of AI to do predictive analytics to help us make decisions about where and
Mm.
how to use the data that we have to make better, more informed decisions. And then increasingly, we're seeing people now kind of understand the importance of what we call leadership. That's the third leg of the stool, that is focused on governance, on ethics, on moral uses, transparency, all the things that kind of surround the use of AI. And we think that's a big opportunity for, again, we go back to this issue of communicators want to have a seat at the table, we want to influence. Well, if
Hmm.
we're not going to be there at that table shaping how AI is used in and around our organizations, we're basically abdicating that to legal, to IT,
Yes.
to HR, to someone else. And
Yeah.
if that's what we want, that's what we're going to get. Now, if on the
Mm.
other hand, we're saying, no, we want to help shape this, then we're the ones who need to be pulling those people together to help shape our decisions on assessing the new technologies, really being very clear on how we're using, what the implications are of using AI, and right even down to CSR strategies. So, a really interesting concept that I've come across is, we're just all using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever learning machine we're using. Those using that technology actually puts more CO2 into the atmosphere. So if you're working for a company that
Okay.
says we're all about clean air, it's like, okay, well, you better take a look at this, because if you don't, one of your shareholders is going to pop up at your next shareholder meeting and go, wait a minute,
Hmm.
what are we doing to reduce the use of electric power or coal driven power, or whatever's putting CO2 in the atmosphere with
Hmm.
power? And there are efforts now underway to reduce the amount of power that these learning systems are using. So but it
Okay.
just means another added dimension that we have to start thinking about under the leadership of how we're using AI. So the productivity will continue to come. We need to experiment with this. The strategy is the biggest immediate area of opportunity for us to go. I need to be thinking about how I can use data to make better decisions to deliver a better business result. And then around that,
Hmm.
of course, is the leadership and the governance models.
Mm. And with predictive AI, what are some of the applications in internal comms where we're using predictive AI to make decisions to
Yeah.
influence things, and also interested in machine learning and how that sort of goes maybe hand in hand or supports the knowledge base to provide strategic decision making for making that impact.
Yeah, I think the answer is not a simple one, because it has a lot of pieces to it, right? Number
Mm,
one is we all have a lot of data that we've been collecting for years. I mean, literally,
yeah.
when you think about every town hall survey that we've done, or employee, organizational health survey or pulse survey, there's tons and tons of data that's there. The question is, do we know how to use it? And I will say my understanding is that today there's no off the shelf, here, let me use this package or this, this productivity based algorithm or tool. You need to have somebody who's a machine learning engineer, who's a data
Hmm.
scientist, to help you say, well, what is it that you really want to find out about your function and the effectiveness of what you're doing, and then what data say sources do you have, and then there's the whole idea of how do we clean the data, make sure that we're using it in the right way, and it delivers a result that is useful to you to make a decision. So in other words, this is not something that most communicators can do on his or her own. Any communicator can
Mm,
do on his or her own. You got to have partners, right? And so that's where we have to reach
yes.
out to IT. We got to reach out to legal. We got to reach out to HR, because often that's where the money is.
Hmm.
Or other resources required to do this. And then we have to take inventory of what data that we have, or maybe what data that we need, so that we can then say, all right, let's answer some questions that we have. When's the right time of day to be publishing content around X? Uh,
Mm,
who should we target on topic Y to be influencers about moving the company in a different direction,
mm,
or going through this change? What channels should we be using? What spokespersons? Who are the people? Is it an executive? Is it a colleague? Is it a peer? Is it a manager? All those things are items that can tell us as internal communications professionals what's going to work better for us, if we have the right data, we're asking the right questions, and
mm,
we have the right partners to help pull that all together. So, what's happening in other functions, and I'll use HR as a good example. What I'm seeing is that HR professionals are probably about 10 years ahead of us already. They're using data to make decisions about screening resumes that are coming through, looking at applications, or doing chatbots to do, or other technologies to do AI-based interviewing, right? So that they can cull down the
mhm,
number of people that they're talking to. So they're already using it both for productivity, but also to do assessments, right, in ways that help HR professionals advise their internal clients on how to make better choices for candidates for open roles. HR, another example, is using, well, actually, Google did this with a project they call Project Oxygen. That's actually located. It's in the book, where they were able to predictively assess who's at risk of leaving this organization, and what interventions can we design and implement to keep that from happening, because we want to hold on
mhm,
and keep the talent. We don't want people walking out the door that we want to keep here. So there are other functions that are also ahead of us. We're kind of late to the party, and
mm,
I mean I'm part of that community as well. So when I say we, it's like I'm part of communications too. And
mm,
but I want to sound the alarm and say, don't wait anymore. We need to jump in on this, and we need to own it, so that we're the ones kind of saying, well, let's use this to do some predictive
mm,
analytics, so we can make better decisions and show you, senior management, that we're
yes.
using this in a very strategic way, and thus we are qualified, and we're able to ask for more resources. So you're talking about dwindling resources, and that's true. There are fewer of us doing this work, but the expectation is, well, let's work smarter, not necessarily harder. Getting there is
Mm,
going to be a challenge, right? We have to change our own behaviors. And one of the things that I advocate in the book and in research that I've been doing is, you got to lean into AI. Yes, the experimentation with the productivity is fine, but you need to understand what some of these terms are. Like, what is machine? You really understand what machine learning is, and
mhm.
how it can be applied to the world of communications. And if you can't, okay, I think you have an answer what you need to start doing. So we have
It
to.
is a language.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Mm,
All those things, and the tools that machine learning engineers are using, right? We don't need to know how to use them, but we need to know what they are, right? So
mhm,
You can say, "Oh, are
Yep.
you taking that from PyTorch? Oh, I see. You're now using that, these things that are off the shelf that you can pull, but now you need to customize." And that's where the conversation between us, we communicators and HR and legal and all the people who need to be part of it, that's where it happens so that we get to the right result.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's so it's really about collaboration and
Yes.
leading before you get led, and being
Yes, I like that, yeah.
proactive. Yeah,
Um,
being proactive towards AI and just opening up the vocabulary around it. And yeah, such an interesting space. And over the last 4 years since you've been doing your research report, what are some of the, I guess, practical AI applications which have taken more mainstream and internal comms to help them do their work more efficiently, which may
yeah,
have previously in your early days could have taken a huge amount of human resource to deliver? What have you
yeah.
seen skyrocketing or trending?
I'm definitely seeing drafting materials, content, drafting it for multiple media formats, right? Give this to me short
Hmm.
format, give it to me long format, give it to me in a speech, give it to me in a social media post. That is like saving tremendous amount of time. And there are so many packages that are out there. So that's, I would say, from a content development on editorial, it's huge. That's probably number one thing that people are using AI for. The second
Hmm.
area that's very closely related would be other media forms, so visual media, right? Creating imagery, creating videos. I mean, there's technologies out there that create, podcasts, video logs, all the stuff that we've spent a lot of time producing and putting together, can be done not seconds, but very little time in multiple formats. So we create or develop it in one format, but we say, all right, now I've got this podcast. Do a
Hmm.
30-second update, video, and give me a 200-word summary and give me some headlines. Write a provocative, summary that will absolutely get people hooked on clicking and watching. So that's where I'm
Hmm.
seeing most of our
Yeah.
energy right now being spent, and wisely so. I think that's a good place to
Mm.
be, right? 'Cause it saves us a ton of
Yeah.
time delivering the content that we're responsible for. It just doesn't necessarily answer the question, okay, is that strategic? Is that a strategic use of it or placement of it? Or
Mm.
are we just generating more content for content's sake? And that's
Hmm.
why I say this is like the next big thing for us to be thinking about is
Yep.
let's lean into AI a bit more on the strategic side. And because we're gonna learn the productivity side. That's happening.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And language translations, like when you're looking
Oh
after
gosh, yeah.
200 countries, I imagine there was a lot of agency translations. How's AI performing? Is it doing the job, or does it still need
Yes.
to be
It's
well
getting there.
overview?
It's getting there very,
Yeah.
very quickly, probably faster than most people realize. Now, the
Hmm.
thing is, does it, is it, I don't know that it'll ever be 100% right. And so having people on the ground in those native tongues, double or triple checking to make sure you're not saying something that you shouldn't be saying is still really important. But in terms of getting something to them that is advanced, I'd say like most of these technology packages for translation are doing a pretty darn good job. So
Hmm. Hmm.
it's no longer the issue that versus 2 or 3 years ago, night and day difference. It's closing the
Yeah,
gap on
amazing.
accuracy very, very quickly.
Hmm. And then AI versus human, and how do we work with AI, sort of collaborate, or where does the AI stop and the human step in, and what's that middle ground looking like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple ways of answering that. There's first of all the people who are afraid that AI is going to take your job, and I always like to say that I didn't come up with this, but I read it somewhere and I've used it. Like AI is not going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI will, better than you.
Mm,
So it's like that's why we want you to learn and lean into it. I think the thing that AI has a long way to go on is putting the human touch, right? That heart, that winning their hearts and engaging their hearts. It's just not there yet. It can't. It can take content that you've developed and polish it. I think make it a little more softer. Maybe that's the right word,
mhm,
or make it more user friendly, but it's not going to be the one that just says, "Here's the way that we need to tell this story." And so,
mhm,
and we as humans are the ones who can assess based off the questions that we ask from the story source. which, that's a really important piece of it. So I go back to my reporting background. It's like, okay, if I'm asking the right questions, I'm going to get the right content to tell the story in ways that engages the heart.
Mm,
And I don't think AI is there, at least not yet. I don't think it will be there for quite some time. So use the power of human imagination and human connection um, to your benefit. To kind of
mhm,
work through getting those details in. Sure, use AI to polish the story once you've written it, but in terms of like coming up with the core content of the story, take your first shot at it.
mhm. It's like the assistant, and in a way, the human
Yeah,
nearly does the
right,
polishing. The AI does a bit of tweaking, but the
right.
human will do the polishing as
I
well.
think that's where it
Yeah.
works best, and then after the AI does the tweaking, go back and just say,
Mm,
"Do I feel anything? Let me run this by somebody else." So running this by another human being, that's
mm,
gonna give you some feedback that's pretty important too. So, don't
mm.
don't underestimate the power of another human heart. It's part of the story.
Yeah, definitely. And reading your book, I saw something around chatbots, and it got me really thinking, about chatbots internally for internal comms teams. I guess once all that data is centralized, and can be trusted and is in a tidy format, so it's in a trusted way of delivering you the answers. The next thing about chatbots is employee facing, and I'm curious, is that already becoming a channel for internal comms, like chatbots for the employees to
It
communicate
is.
with and engage with?
I think it is in certain components of internal communications, especially around comp and benefits, things that are really standardized within organizations. And
Hmm.
this is our policy, and this is how we handle vacation, or here's what you're entitled to. In those cases, it's like that all that stuff is already written. It's just a question of making sure that the chat box translate it appropriately, right?
Yes.
Where I think the next opportunity will be is on other issue related content, right? What's our
Hmm.
position on, on clean air or on coal-fired electricity or whatever that's going to be.
Hmm.
I think that's an opportunity for internal comms working with subject matter experts to create the content the chatbots will use and can use
Yes.
very effectively. The challenge there is, life changes, world changes, circumstances change, and it means you can't just put it on autopilot and expect that what you put in there will serve you for a long, long time. So it takes care and feeding with these chatbots, and they're designed supposedly so they can go out and search. Hopefully in the right places, but we've seen examples where they're going into the wrong places and they're coming back with horrible, like really bad content. There's
Mm,
an example, I think, in the book of some things that went really, really wrong with chatbots that were not given the right parameters, and that's all the
mm.
coding and the work that our machine learning engineer friends need to help us with.
Yeah, that's my bet for the next 2 to 3 years is the chatbots and even like the opportunities and things like you're talking about policies and you have certain programs where people can come in and talk to it and get all the information they want and fine tuning those I think is going to be the next big thing.
Yeah,
Making resources available and yes, such an interesting space.
yeah.
The speed is moving,
So
and
and so
I'm looking forward to your next report.
Yes, well, thank you. You'll see in the we'll have the survey done probably in the early spring, and then the second piece
Hmm.
of this is what we call our landscape report, where we go out and really canvas the world and say this is what's really new and differentiated that's happened in the last 12 months in the world of AI for communication. So, what are
Yes.
the new productivity tools? What are the new strategic applications? What are some case studies that we're finding? So we're canvassing the world, trying to find the best. So anybody watching this has a case study, please feel free to reach out to me. We'd love to talk with you and include it.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. One of the things I also sort of onboarding in regards to measurement in the space of internal comms is that it feels to me that a lot of internal communicators are communicators, communications teams are communicators, and I feel that comes with creativity. And we're now also asking for a lot more analytics to come in. So
No,
that sort of creative mind, analytical mind where we're becoming both to deliver the complexities of internal comms, that art and science
exactly.
coming together.
Yeah,
Mm,
and that's okay. It's like, well, we just have to realize that, look, if we didn't have companies employing us, we could be as artistic as we ever wanted and just tell great
mhm,
stories. We
Mhm.
call that being a news reporter or a magazine writer, right? That's awesome, but that's not what we're being paid for. We're being paid and we're employed to help support an agenda for the organization.
Mhm.
That's the choice that you make when you're running or you're working in employee communications. And so
Mm.
as you sign up for do that to do that, they hired you and they want you there because you know how to tell a story. Okay, so
Mm. Mhm.
don't lose control of that discipline and it's a craft, and respect
Yes.
it and nourish it, right? Feed it. Sometimes we get so far on the other side about measuring and data and analytics that we forget. Hold on, I gotta have something content that actually means something to someone.
Mm.
And so they're both really important, but the difference between just writing stories and writing stories with a purpose to do something to achieve a result, it requires analytics. It requires some sort of
Mm.
measurement component so that we can go to our bosses and their bosses and wherever else the change it's got to go to say, we're doing good things. It's working. We're actually changing behavior, changing attitudes. And you need this to drive performance for this organization. And the
Mhm.
last thing I'll say about that is there's a whole section in the book on change management and how critical storytelling, employee communication, segmentation, all the things that we've
Mhm.
already talked about are to the discipline of managing change. The problem for a lot of communicators is that we approach it solely from a communications point of view. How do we tell people what's going to change, what's important to them, what's the story that we need to tell, what's the master narrative, and that's important. But we have to understand, wait a minute, there's people also we have to work with who are educated and experienced in driving the discipline of
Mhm.
managing change. That's different than just doing change communications. We have to have
Mm.
both of those, right? We have to really
Yes.
understand the discipline of change management and then apply our craft of storytelling, the creativity to your point,
Mm.
Brendan, and the measurement components that go with that, and say we're making a
Mm.
difference in a very clear and compelling way. So
Mhm.
it isn't one or the other. It's both. These things have to work
Mm.
together, or we're not doing the jobs that we should be doing.
Mhm. So storytelling, the discipline of change management, and the measurement underpinning that, those three things come together
Yep.
to produce the credibility. And, this is where we started as our benchmark, and this is how we've moved the dial.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
and next
I,
thing you get a knocked on the door and invited to the table. And, brand promise really comes down to
yeah.
the brand delivery, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I when I talk to communicators these days, I say, "What do you think is the number one thing that we can count on, like with great dependency?" And they're all, "I don't know, fewer resources." I go, "No, it's change. The one thing that we
mm,
absolutely know is going to be asked of us is to communicate change. It doesn't matter if it's a new product, if it's cultural change, if it's IT transformation, digital transformation, whatever it is, it's all rooted in the concept of change. So why would we not want to learn more about the discipline of how to manage change? We already
mm,
got the communication, you check the box on that one. But we need to learn the discipline of change. And so I'm a bit of an advocate these days for people going either getting certified or educated. Pick whatever form of change management your enterprise supports, and learn it. And
mm,
I'm personally certified in ProSci change management methodology, and I'm a big believer, and I think it's really great. And I use it as a starting point for all the change communications. I've worked with many I've worked with the United Nations. I've worked with very large scale global companies who are going through massive change, and they all start with the same set of needs, right? What is our change story? What is our narrative? Okay, well, there's an opportunity for us to create a really compelling story that tugs at our hearts, our hands, and our heads, right? But that's not enough. That's like,
mm,
who do we tell this story to, and how do we tell it? How do we keep this alive while we're going through this massive transformation that's so painful to so many people, and so in such personal ways? How do we tell them? I know it hurts to have to go through this change, but remember why we're doing this. And then how do we tie that change narrative to your point, Brendan, our
mm,
reason for being as an enterprise, as a company? What's our purpose,
mm.
right? So there's a lot of pieces that we got to thread together, but when it's done and it's done well, people are like, okay, I get it. This is
It's
hard,
a
but
beautiful thing.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I'm in. I'm in, right?
Mm.
So there's the change management discipline also is like an understanding of the human emotion. So are you familiar with the Kubler-Ross curve of change, right? So
No, I don't think so.
the Kubler-Ross chain, oh, something's changing, and you're like, "Oh, this is bad. This is bad." And then it's like, then you get angry, and your morale goes down. And all of a sudden, something happens, and you go, "All right, I'm gonna try it, see if I like it." Okay, and at some point, when you're going back up this change curve, you're gonna either do one of
Mhm.
two things. You're gonna say, "Nah, I'm out," right? Or like, "I'm in." This is this area here where my finger is, where we're trying to get people to say, you got to understand, people aren't going to follow you because you say we're going to change and we're doing digital transformation. Yay! Okay, now what? What
Mm.
does it mean? Oh, you mean I have to take this whole class and I have to do this while I'm doing that? I got a day job and no, it's hard. This is hard stuff. So
Mm.
let's understand the human element. This is what change management discipline does, right? It makes you think about the end user. It makes you think about who's going to stand in the way and say, no, I'm a thought leader and I can I can convince other people to block this or to be a non-supporter of this change initiative. Well, if you're not anticipating that, and that's what again what the discipline of change management does, you're in for a really rough ride. And even if you do
Mm.
anticipate you're in for a rough ride because it's going to happen, but at least you've thought it through and you have a strategy to address it. So that's what I mean, Brenda, when I say it's like we know how to communicate. We don't yet know most of us fully how to communicate it in conjunction with the
Mm.
discipline of change management. So let's learn it. Let's learn it and
Yeah.
be part of it and let's influence it, right? Versus being told, hey, this is going to happen. You got you communicate this with training or whatever this element is. It's like, no, well, let's look at the big picture because if I do this wrong, it's just going to be confusing and be people won't see it as part of the
Mm.
bigger picture. They won't connect it to our sense of purpose as an organization or as an enterprise. So let's just do it right. But that means you
Yeah.
bring us in early. Right? We need to be consulted. That's our influence at the table. It's like, hey, you
Mm.
brought us in because we're communication experts. We're also change management experts too. So we get it.
Mm.
You talk your talk.
Mm.
We understand what you're going for. Let's show you how communications can support it. That is sort of the big thing that I see, like, when people say, "Well, where do you see the future?" It's like, the future's here, and the future is all about change, because it's the one thing that we can
Yeah.
absolutely count on. So learn it.
Mm.
Jump in.
Yeah. Mark, what an interesting profession that you've taken on board, and it's it's kind of inspiring, and I can imagine as a internal comms professional when you find an organization where you really believe in their purpose, their mission and their vision, and you have the ability to make that change happen from within that position through that knowledge base you're talking about. It's an extremely rewarding function and career opportunity. What would you say to anyone sort of considering this as a career path moving forward, based on what you know now?
Uh, I would say there's never a better time than now to really look into this as your career. I mean, number one, it has tremendous influence in organizations. Internal communications has far greater now than it did. Look, 20, 30 years ago when I was editor of a news magazine, that's all I did. I
Mm.
wrote, great stories, fun stories about, people doing stuff on their off time, off time, and nothing to do with, the business. Now it's different. And so it's not just that, oh, it's nice to have it. Like the expectation is you're going to do something with employee communications that helps drive performance in this business. And I know because I'm an executive how important it is to engage the internal stakeholder
Mhm.
before we engage anybody else. Because to your earlier point, Brendan, if it's not the real stuff on the inside, it's never going to pass on the outside. So a tremendous amount of influence, tremendous amount of opportunity for growth and development. I tell people who've done PR their whole lives, and internal comms always have been the ugly stepchild, right? of
Yes,
PR, like,
traditionally.
yeah,
Not anymore,
I,
Mark. Not
yeah,
anymore. It's
yeah,
changing now.
I know. And the point was like I know I've done PR. I was the chief comms officer for Pepsi externally as well as internally, but I knew how to integrate, right, all of those stakeholders. And that's what you do when you go into larger roles in organization. It's like you don't work with just one stakeholder. And anybody who aspires to ascend to a chief communications officer or type of role, it's like if you don't know internal stakeholders, forget it. You need
Yep.
to have that experience at some point in your career. So Don't look at it the ugly stepchild, right? This is a really big empowering and enabling function in communication. So go for it. Number
Hmm.
three, I would say it can be very lucrative. Like people can make some really good income when you get to
Hmm.
the top of the chain with internal comms, or have that experience moving into a chief communications role. This is a big enabler. So don't think it's just like,
Hmm.
oh, it's boring internal. Most people, they think about it as newsletters. It's like, no, if we've done nothing else in this conversation, Brendan, I'm hoping we've got
Yeah.
people going, God, I had no idea that internal comms was that complex.
It's a science
And
and it's an art,
yeah,
The more
it's
I talk about it with you, the more I'm appreciating it for what it really is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
Thank you. And that's what
mm,
we're trying to do with the book. Both John and I are huge advocates for having people think about this as a career path, and where better to do it than in the undergraduate. When we did the initial research for this book, just here in the U.S., there were the 350 degree programs in communications. Not one of them offered a full course on employee communication, including strategic communication degrees in these colleges and universities. Not one.
mm.
That was
It's amazing.
yeah, it is. And so we were like, well, let's change that. And there might be a chapter in a book on PR about internal comms, but that's as much as we got. And I'm like, well, we think there's something here to really work with. And
Yeah.
frankly, 30, 40 years ago, this couldn't have been written because it didn't exist.
Mm,
I started in internal communications way back, I'll just say in the 1980s. And it wasn't about this. It was really more about the general, hey, write the newsletter, get some
mm,
pieces of news. It evolved very, very quickly, with email,
mm,
the internet, social media. This is the next really big wave that's changing. The AI is changing the way that internal communications is viewed and what it can deliver for the organization. So this is a
mm.
really great time to be into the space.
Really is. It's fascinating that there's not a particular course lined up for internal comms. So you got to sort of work your way through it. And it's nice to see you're closing the gap on that, Mark. It's
We're
really
doing our
cool.
best. We're doing our
Yeah,
best.
man.
So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll have more colleges and universities that sign up for this. We have quite a few already that did the first edition, which was really, I think, well received and opened some eyes about what this is as a career. And we're hoping that with all do case studies, we have biographies of people all over the world in markets all over the planet, and how they're looking at these issues in all kinds of new case studies, along with the chapters you mentioned. We talked about AI measurement, and there's another one
Hmm.
that's new on crisis communications and the critical role
Hmm.
that employee communications plays with crisis comms. So, anybody in
Yeah.
PR is like, no, PR is they own crisis comms. No, no. There's a lot going on
Yeah.
with internal comms too with crisis.
Mark, we might have to do another podcast episode on crisis management. I think that in itself will be
Oh,
a
I'd love
very
to.
interesting topic, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Thank you so much for your time today. I've got so many questions I haven't asked that, but I think we need to regroup on this. And thanks for coming in, our first international podcast. I'm really excited. Thank you to Marcos, my producer. He's outstanding. He's made all this come together today. And Mark, where would we find you? How will people connect with you and keep connected with your story and your mission?
Would love to stay connected with you and to all of your followers. Thank you for this amazing opportunity. I'm very humbled and honored to spend this time with you and talk about something that I'm so passionate about. Not to mention my wrestling and coaching and jiu-jitsu and all the other stuff that we've talked about. So you hit on all
Yeah.
my buttons. It's great. Well, wonderful to meet you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. The jiu-jitsu and wrestling is going to be staying in the podcast, so it's going to be probably the big pull for this episode. Internal comms, gotta
Yeah,
love that.
it's interesting how many people in communications have combat sports in their history.
Is
I'm
that
finding
right?
it wherever I go. Some do karate, some do jiu-jitsu, whatever. It's taekwondo. It's not surprising, given all the battles we have to fight from time to time, right?
So if you're into martial arts and you're thinking about your future, this could be the perfect direction to be taking.
Ready-made for career advancement. There you go.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time, Mark. That is awesome.